The sky turned dark. Faster than anyone expected. One moment, the ocean was peaceful, almost too quiet, and the next, it felt like the world itself was changing. For Mark Carter, it started as just another day, another responsibility, another sacrifice. Because that's what his life had become. He wasn't just a man anymore, he was a father, a protector, a man who had already lost too much, and refused to lose anything else. Every morning, his day began the same way. A soft knock on a small bedroom door, a sleepy voice saying, "Daddy." 5 more minutes, and then a smile. Emma. His 6-year-old daughter. The only reason he kept going. Mark wasn't always this serious. There was a time when he laughed more, dreamed more. But life has a way of changing people. After his wife passed away, everything shifted. Suddenly, the world felt heavier, colder, and yet he had no choice but to stay strong because Emma needed him. So when his boss, Olivia Hayes, told him about the trip, he hesitated. "Just one day," she said. "We inspect the island project. And we're back." Her tone was confident. As always, Olivia wasn't used to hearing no. She was powerful, sharp, a woman who built an empire with her own hands. And Mark, he was just one of her most reliable employees. But to Emma, he was everything. He almost said no, but then he looked at Emma that night, asleep in her bed, and he whispered, "I'll be back before you even miss me." He believed it. He had to. The next morning, they boarded the boat. It was small, but sturdy. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. Mark stood near the edge, watching the water carefully. Something didn't feel right. "You always this serious?" Olivia's voice broke the silence. He glanced at her. She stood tall, dressed perfectly even in the middle of the ocean. "Just thinking," he replied. "About work?" she asked. Mark shook his head slightly. "My daughter," that made her pause. "You never talk about her." He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd be interested." For the first time, Olivia didn't have a quick response. Hours passed. The air changed. The wind grew stronger. The sky slowly darkened. Mark noticed it first, then the captain, then everyone. "Something's not right," Mark said quietly. Olivia crossed her arms. "It's just weather. We'll be fine." But even she didn't sound fully convinced. Then it happened. A sudden gust of wind hit the boat, hard. The calm ocean turned violent. Waves rose higher and higher, crashing against the sides. The boat shook. "Everyone hold on." The captain shouted, but his voice barely carried over the storm. Within minutes, chaos took over. Water flooded the deck. People shouted, panic spread like fire. Mark's instincts kicked in. He grabbed onto a railing, steadying himself. Then he saw Olivia lose her balance. Without thinking, he reached out and grabbed her arm. "Hold on," he yelled. Another wave slammed into the boat, stronger this time. The sky roared with thunder. Lightning flashed across the darkness. Olivia's confident expression disappeared. For the first time, she looked afraid, truly afraid. "Mark," she shouted, "I've got you." He replied firmly, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not work, not titles, just survival. Mark's heart pounded in his chest, but not because of the storm, because of Emma. Her face flashed. In his mind, her laughter, her tiny hands holding his. "Come back soon, Daddy." Another wave rose in front of them. This one was different. Bigger, stronger, unstoppable. Time slowed down. Mark tightened his grip on Olivia. She looked at him, eyes wide, and in that second, everything changed. The wave crashed. Darkness, silence. Then, the sound of waves. Soft, repeating, endless. Mark coughed violently. Salt water burned his throat. His body ached. Every muscle screamed in pain. But he was alive. Slowly, he opened his eyes. Bright sunlight blinded him. Sand stuck to his face. The ocean stretched behind him like nothing had happened. He forced himself to sit up. His head spun, but something felt wrong, too quiet. Then he saw her. Olivia. Lying motionless on the sand. His heart dropped instantly. No. He crawled toward her, panic taking over. "Olivia, wake up." No response. His hands shook as he checked her pulse. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. There it was. A faint heartbeat. Relief hit him like a wave. She's alive. Mark took a deep breath, then acted fast. He carefully lifted her into his arms. Her body felt cold, to still. Stay with me, he whispered. He carried her across the beach, searching for any kind of shelter. Finally, he found a broken palm tree, offering a small patch of shade. He gently laid her down. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. Mark stayed by her side. Watching. Waiting. Hoping. But his mind kept drifting somewhere else. Emma. What if I don't make it back? The thought hit him hard, harder than the storm itself. For the first time in years, Mark felt helpless. Then a small movement. Olivia's fingers twitched. He leaned closer instantly. Olivia. Her eyes slowly opened. Confused, scared, lost. Where? She whispered weakly. Where are we? Mark looked around. The empty island, the endless ocean. No boats, no people, no rescue. He swallowed hard. We're stranded. Silence. Heavy. Real. Olivia tried to sit up, but winced in pain. This can't be happening. But it was. No phones. No signal, no help. Just two people. Alone. The sun slowly began to set. The sky turned orange. Then red, then purple. Beautiful. Terrifying. Olivia looked at Mark. Not as her employee, not as someone beneath her, but as the only person she had left. Fear filled her eyes. But there was something else too, something deeper, something unspoken. And in that moment, Mark realized something important. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was the beginning of something bigger, something neither of them expected. If this story is already pulling you in, make sure you hit that like button. Comment below. If you were in Mark's place, what would you do first on that island? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The first night was the hardest. Not because of the hunger, not because of the pain, but because of the silence. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own thoughts louder than ever. Cold winds brushed against their skin as darkness slowly covered the island. The ocean, which once roared with chaos, now whispered quietly in the distance. Mark sat near a small fire he had managed to build using broken branches and dry leaves. Across from him, Olivia sat quietly, the same woman who once controlled boardrooms, signed million-dollar deals, and never showed weakness. Now looked different. Fragile. Human. I've never felt this helpless, she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark glanced at her, then back at the fire. A faint smile crossed his face. Welcome to my world. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? Mark leaned back, staring at the flames. I've been raising my daughter alone for years, he said calmly. You learn to survive, no matter what. That caught her off guard, because this wasn't the version of Mark she knew. At work, he was quiet, focused, efficient. But this was something deeper. You never talk about your personal life, Olivia said gently. Mark shrugged. Never seemed important to you. That sentence hit harder than he expected. And for a moment, Olivia had no response, because deep down, she knew it was true. She had never asked, never cared enough to. The fire crackled. Between them, awkward silence settled in. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was filled with thoughts neither of them knew how to say. The night grew colder. Mark noticed Olivia shivering slightly, without saying anything. He moved a little closer to the fire, adjusting it to make the flame stronger. Here, he said quietly. Stay close. It'll help. For a moment, she hesitated. Then slowly, she moved closer. No titles, no distance, just two people trying to survive the night. Above them, the sky stretched wide, filled with stars. A view neither of them had taken the time to notice before. It's beautiful, Olivia whispered. Mark looked up. Yeah, he said softly. Emma loves the stars. She glanced at him. You talk about her a lot. A small smile appeared on his face. She's my whole world. And for the first time, Olivia didn't feel jealous of success, power, or control. She felt something else, something unfamiliar. Loneliness. The next morning came. Slowly, golden sunlight spread across the island. But reality hit just as fast. They were still stranded. Still alone. Still uncertain. "All right," Mark said. Standing up, first rule survival mode. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Survival mode. He nodded. "We need food, water, shelter." She stood up too, brushing sand off her clothes. "Okay. Tell me what to do." Mark paused, because for the first time, she wasn't giving orders, she was asking for help. "Start with something simple," he said. "Let's find food." They moved through the island together. Mark led the way, scanning trees and plants carefully. "There," he pointed. "Coconuts." Without hesitation, he climbed the tree. Strong, skilled, focused. Olivia watched from below, surprised, impressed. This wasn't the man she saw in the office. This was someone else entirely. Someone real. A few minutes later, he dropped down with coconuts. "Breakfast," he said with a small grin. She tried to open one, struggled, tried again. Still nothing. Frustration started building here, Mark said. Taking it gently, with one clean hit, he cracked it open. She stared at him. "You make it look easy." He chuckled lightly. "It's not about easy. It's about practice." She didn't respond, but something about that line stayed with her as the day went on. Olivia tried to help more. She gathered sticks, collected leaves, but she wasn't used to this life. At one point she slipped, fell hard onto the sand. Pain shot through her leg, but it wasn't the pain that broke her. It was the frustration. "I'm useless here," she snapped. The words echoed louder than she expected. Mark walked over calmly. No judgment, no anger. He offered his hand. "You're not useless," he said firmly. She looked away. "Really? Because I can't even open a coconut." He shook his head slightly. "You're not useless," he repeated. "You're just not used to needing anyone." Silence. That sentence hit deep, deeper than anything else, because it was true. Olivia Hayes had spent her entire life being independent, strong, unbreakable. But here, none of that mattered, and for the first time in years, she didn't have control. Days passed. Slowly, quietly, but something began to change. They talked more. Not about work, not about business, but about life. They laughed. Small moments at first, then more. Mark told her stories about Emma, how she refused to eat vegetables, how she loved bedtime stories, how she once stayed up all night just to see a shooting star. Olivia listened, really listened, and for the first time, she envied something simple, a life filled with love in return. She shared her story, the long nights, the sacrifices, the loneliness behind success. "I thought if I kept moving forward, I'd eventually feel something," she admitted one evening. Mark looked at her. "And did you?" She shook her head slowly. "No." The sun began to set again, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. They sat side by side, closer than before. No distance, no barriers. Olivia looked at him. Really looked at him, not as her employee, not as someone beneath her, but as a man, a real one, strong, but kind, quiet, but deep. And for the first time in years, her walls started to break. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. Because sometimes, it takes losing everything to finally see what truly matters. If you're feeling this connection growing, don't forget to like this video, comment below. Some nights change everything. Not because something big happens, but because something inside you finally shifts. The island was quieter than usual that evening. The wind had softened. The waves moved gently across the shore, and for the first time since the storm, there was peace. Mark sat near the fire, staring into the flames, lost in thought. Not about survival, not about escape, but about something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Beside him, Olivia sat closer than she ever had before, not by accident, not because of the cold, but because something invisible was pulling her there. "Mark," she said softly. Her voice carried something different tonight, something uncertain. He turned slightly. "Yeah." She hesitated. For a woman who always had the right words, This was new. What if we don't get rescued? The question hung in the air, heavy, real. Mark looked back at the fire. We will, he said calmly. But Olivia shook her head. No. I mean it. Her voice cracked slightly. What if this is it? What if this is our reality now? He didn't answer right away, because deep down, he had asked himself the same question, but he couldn't afford to believe it, not with Emma waiting for him. You can't think like that, he said quietly. But I do, she replied. And you know what scares me? He looked at her again. It's not dying, she said. It's realizing I never really lived. That hit deeper than anything else. The fire flickered between them, casting soft shadows across their faces. I spent my whole life chasing success. Olivia continued. Money, power, control. She let out a small, bitter laugh. And now, none of it matters. Mark stayed silent. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is listen. I don't have anyone waiting for me, she whispered. That sentence lingered in the air. Mark's chest tightened, because he did, Emma. And suddenly, the distance between their worlds felt heavier than ever. I thought being strong meant not needing anyone, Olivia said. But now, she looked at him. I think I was wrong, for a moment. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the fire, and the ocean beyond it. Then she said something that changed everything. Can you pretend something for me? Mark frowned slightly. Pretend. She nodded, but her eyes told a deeper story. Just for tonight, she said softly. Can we pretend we're not alone? He didn't move, didn't speak. Just to people, she continued. No past. No titles, no expectations. Her voice softened even more. Just US. The air shifted. This wasn't just a question, it was vulnerability. The kind she had never shown anyone before. Mark felt his heart beat a little faster, because he understood what she was. Asking not for survival, not for comfort, but for connection. And that scared him. Because once you open that door, you can't close it again. I don't know if that's a good idea, he said honestly. Olivia looked down, a small disappointed smile forming. Yeah. I figured you'd say that. But something in her expression stopped him, for the first time. Olivia Hayes didn't look powerful. She looked alone. And Mark knew that feeling all too well. He thought about the nights after his wife passed. The silence, the emptiness, the longing for someone to just be there, and in that moment, he made a choice. Okay? Olivia looked up, surprised. Just for tonight, he added. A soft smile appeared on her face, not the confident one from the office, but something real, something warm. They sat closer, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence. Tell me something real, she said quietly. Mark thought for a moment. I was terrified the day Emma was born, he admitted. She smiled slightly. Why? Because I knew from that moment on, I couldn't fail. Her expression softened. And I still feel that way every day, he added. She looked at him differently now, not just with curiosity, but with admiration. My turn, she said. He nodded. I built everything I have, because I didn't want to feel small again. Mark frowned slightly. What do you mean? She hesitated, then spoke. I grew up with nothing, she said. No safety. No support. Her voice lowered. I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone. Mark understood more than she expected. But somewhere along the way, she continued, I stopped letting people in at all. Silence, because now, everything made sense. The walls, the distance, the control, they weren't strength, they were protection. The fire burned lower. The night grew deeper, and without realizing it, they had moved even closer, not just physically, but emotionally. Do you ever feel like life gave you something amazing? Mark started, but took something just as important away. Olivia looked at him. I think life does that to everyone. Another quiet moment passed. Then a soft breeze moved through the trees. The stars above them shined brighter, and in that stillness, something shifted. Olivia leaned slightly toward him, not fully, not intentionally, but enough Mark noticed, but didn't move away, because for the first time in years, he didn't want to. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not treating me like who I used to be." He shook his head gently. "I'm just treating you like who you are." Her eyes met his. And in that moment, everything else disappeared. No island, no storm, no past, just two people finally seeing each other, and that night, they didn't feel stranded anymore. And don't forget to subscribe. Some connections don't happen all at once. They grow quietly, slowly, in the spaces between words. In the silence between moments, the morning after that night felt different. The same island. The same ocean. The same uncertain reality. But something had changed. Mark woke up to the sound of waves gently touching the shore. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he saw her. Olivia sitting a few feet away, watching the sunrise. Still. Peaceful. And for the first time since he met her, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone who had finally put down a heavy weight. "You're up early," Mark said. Sitting up, she smiled softly, without looking at him. "I didn't want to miss this." The sky slowly turned from deep blue to golden orange. The light touched the water like something out of a dream. "I've never had time to watch a sunrise," she admitted. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Never." She shook her head. "I was always chasing the next thing. The next deal. The next goal." She paused. "I didn't realize how much I was missing." Mark looked at her quietly, because he understood something she was just beginning to realize. Sometimes, slowing down feels like losing, but it's actually the only way to truly live. "Emma loves mornings like this," he said. "She says the sky looks like it's telling a story." Olivia finally turned toward him. "And what story do you think this one is telling?" Mark smiled slightly. "That maybe we're exactly where we're supposed to be." She didn't respond, but the way she looked at him said everything. The day began like the others, but easier. Lighter. They worked together, not as boss and employee, but as a team. Mark showed her how to gather dry wood properly, how to spot safe food, how to listen to the environment. And Olivia, she learned fast. At first, she struggled. Her hands weren't used to this kind of work. Her body wasn't trained for survival, but she didn't give up. "I'm not stopping until I get this right," she said, trying again to crack a coconut. Mark watched her, amused. "You're stubborn," she smirked. "That's how I built everything I have." "Yeah," he replied. "But this time, you don't have to do it alone." She paused, just for a second, then continued. But something about that sentence stayed with her. Later that afternoon, they sat near the shore, resting. The sun was warm, the breeze soft. "Tell me something," Olivia said. Mark glanced at her. What was she like? He knew exactly who she meant. His expression softened. "My wife." She nodded gently. Mark looked out at the ocean. For a moment, he didn't speak. "Then she was everything," he said quietly. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt, just truth. "She had this way of making everything feel lighter," he continued. "Even on the worst days." Olivia listened carefully. "She believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." He smiled faintly. "And she gave me Emma." Silence. "She passed away when Emma was just a baby," he added. Olivia's heart tightened. "I'm sorry." Mark nodded. "Me too." But there was something else in his expression, not just pain, but strength. Because he had survived it. And somehow, he had turned that pain into love. That night, the fire burned brighter, warmer. They sat closer than ever before. Not out of necessity, but because it felt right. "I used to think love made people weak," Olivia said suddenly. Mark looked at her, and now, she hesitated. "Now I think it's the only thing that makes people strong." Their eyes met, and in that moment, there were no walls left, no distance, no fear, just honesty. "I don't want this to end," she admitted softly. Mark didn't respond right away, because the truth was, he didn't want it to end either, but reality was waiting. Somewhere beyond that island. Emma. His responsibility, his life, and Olivia. She was part of a completely different world. "I don't know what happens after this," he said finally. She nodded. "Neither do I. But right now," she added, looking at him, "I don't want to think about that." He understood, because sometimes the present moment is all you have, and sometimes it's enough. The fire crackled softly. The stars filled the sky again, and without thinking, Olivia leaned slightly toward him. This time, closer than before, Mark didn't move away, because for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. Connection, real, honest, uncomplicated. No expectations, no pressure. Just two people finding each other in the most unexpected place. And in that quiet moment, something beautiful happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but real, their hearts. Finally, without walls. If you're feeling this connection grow, make sure to like this video. Comment below. Do you think their love will survive after they leave the island? Hope is a dangerous thing, because sometimes it saves you, and sometimes it breaks you. The days on the island had started to blur together. Sunrise, survival, sunset, and somewhere in between. Mark and Olivia had found something neither of them expected. Peace. But peace doesn't last forever. It started with a sound, faint, distant, most easy to ignore. Mark was near the shoreline, checking for anything useful the tide might have brought in. Olivia was a few steps behind him, collecting dry wood. Then he froze. "Wait." Olivia looked at him. "What?" He raised his hand slightly. "Listen." They both stood still. The wind slowed, the waves softened, and then there it was again. A low, distant hum. Olivia's eyes widened. "Is that?" Mark turned toward the horizon. His heart started racing. Helicopter. For a second, neither of them moved, as if they were afraid it might disappear if they did. Then suddenly everything changed. "Hey!" Mark shouted, running toward the open beach. Olivia followed instantly. They waved their arms wildly, jumping, shouting, "We're here." The sound grew louder, closer. A helicopter appeared in the distance. Small at first, then clearer. Hope exploded inside them. "Over here, please." Olivia screamed. Mark quickly grabbed a piece of driftwood and started waving it, trying anything to get attention. The helicopter circled. Once. Their hearts pounded. Twice. "Come on, come on," Mark whispered under his breath. But then, it kept moving. Past them, away, silence. The sound faded. The sky returned to emptiness. And just like that, hope disappeared. Olivia slowly lowered her arms. "No, no, no." Mark stood still, staring at the sky, as if willing it to come back. But it didn't. The weight of reality hit harder than ever. They had been so close, and now they were still alone. Olivia turned away, her eyes filling with tears. "We were right there." Mark clenched his jaw, trying to stay strong. "It'll come back," he said firmly. But even he wasn't sure. Hours passed. The sun moved higher, then lower. Neither of them spoke much, because hope, once broken, leaves behind a different kind of silence. Then just as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Mark heard it again. Faint, but real. His head snapped up. "Olivia." She looked at him instantly. "You hear it too." This time, they didn't hesitate. "Fire," Mark said quickly. "We need smoke." They rushed into action. No panic, no confusion. Just focus. Mark gathered dry leaves. Olivia stacked branches. Their movements were fast, precise. Because this time, they couldn't miss it. The fire-lit. Smoke rose into the sky. Thick, visible. The sound grew louder. The helicopter returned. "This way." Mark shouted. Olivia waved both arms, standing as tall as she could. The helicopter slowed, hovered, and then it turned toward them. Relief hit like a wave, stronger than anything before. "We did it." Olivia whispered. Mark let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Moments later, the helicopter descended. Wind rushed around them as it landed. Sand flew into the air. Rescue had finally come. But something felt different. Heavier. Because now, it was real. The end of the island. The end of this world they had built together. A rescuer stepped out, shouting instructions. But Mark barely heard him, because Olivia was looking at him, not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with something deeper. Mark. He turned toward her. And in that moment, everything they hadn't said felt louder than anything else. They climbed into the helicopter, sat across from each other, the doors closed, and just like that, the island began to fade beneath them. From above, it looked small, almost insignificant. But to them, it had been everything. Inside the helicopter, silence returned. But this time, it wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. Unspoken words, unanswered questions. Olivia looked out the window, watching the island disappear. Mark watched her, trying to understand what came next. Because out there, in the real world, things were different. Responsibilities. Expectations. Reality. And suddenly, what they had felt on the island didn't seem so simple anymore. After a long silence, Olivia spoke. Was it real? Her voice was soft, almost afraid. Mark didn't hesitate. Every second, she closed her eyes briefly, taking that in because she felt it too, but feeling something and living it were two very different things. The helicopter moved forward, closer to civilization, closer to reality, and further away from them, because deep down, they both knew what they had on that island might not survive outside it, but neither of them said it, because some truths are too painful to speak out loud. As the city skyline appeared in the distance, everything felt different, louder, faster, colder. The life they knew was waiting, but so was the question. They couldn't answer, was this the end? Or just the beginning of something even harder? Reality. It doesn't knock before it enters, it just arrives. The moment the helicopter landed, everything changed. Noise. People. Voices. Shouting. Cameras flashing. After days of silence on the island, the world suddenly felt too loud, too fast, too overwhelming. Over here. Are you okay? How long were you stranded? Mark instinctively stepped slightly in front of Olivia, not because he had to, but because it felt natural. Protective. Medical teams rushed toward them, checking vitals, asking questions. Olivia, once so composed in front of boardrooms, now looked disoriented, not weak, just disconnected, because part of her was still on that island. Ma'am, we need you to come this way, a medic said. She nodded slowly, then paused, and looked back at Mark. For a brief second, everything else disappeared, just like it had on the island, but then reality stepped in again. They were pulled in different directions, different vehicles, different paths. No time to talk, no time to process, no time to process, no time to say what mattered. And just like that, they were separated. Hours later, Mark sat quietly in a hospital room, clean white walls, soft beeping machines. Safe, but something didn't feel right. Emma. That was his first thought. Always. Dad. The door burst open, and there she was. Emma ran straight into his arms. Mark held her tightly, closing his eyes. For a moment, nothing else mattered. I missed you so much, she whispered. I'm here, he replied softly. I'm not going anywhere. But even as he said it, a small part of him wondered, was that completely true? Because something inside him had changed, and he couldn't ignore it. Later that night, after the hospital cleared him, Mark returned home. Everything was the same. The couch, the kitchen, Emma's toys scattered on the floor, his life, the life he had built. But he didn't feel the same. Because for the first time in years, someone else had become part of his thoughts. Olivia. Meanwhile, across the city, Olivia stood in front of a massive glass window, inside her luxury penthouse. The skyline stretched endlessly before her. Bright. Powerful. Familiar. This was her world. Control. Success. Perfection. But tonight, it felt empty. Her assistant stood nearby. Your schedule is already filling up. The board wants a meeting tomorrow. Cancel it, Olivia said calmly. The assistant froze. I'm sorry. Cancel everything for a week. That had never happened before. Not once. But Olivia didn't care. Because for the first time, work wasn't the most important thing in her life. Later that night, she sat alone. No emails, no calls, no distractions. Just silence, and memories, the fire, the ocean, his voice, the way he looked at her. Not like a CEO, not like someone powerful, but like someone real, someone human. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't control, fear. Fear because what if what they had was already gone? Days passed, Mark returned to his routine, work, home, Emma, but something was missing. He noticed it in the quiet moments, when Emma was asleep. When the house was still, his mind would drift, back to the island. Back to her. He tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself it was temporary, that it would fade, but it didn't, because some connections don't disappear, they stay, no matter how far you go, on the other side. Olivia tried to return to her world, meetings, decisions, control, but she found herself distracted, losing focus, pausing mid-conversation, thinking about things that had nothing to do with business, like how he smiled, how he listened, how he made everything feel simple. And that scared her because her entire life had been built on control, and this was something she couldn't control. One evening, Mark sat outside his house, watching the sunset, just like they used to. Emma sat beside him. "Are you thinking about her?" she asked innocently. Mark froze slightly. Kids, they notice everything. He smiled faintly. "Maybe." Emma tilted her head. "Is she nice?" He looked at the sky. "Yeah," he said softly. "She's different." Emma grinned. "I like her already." Mark chuckled, but deep down, he felt something heavier, because liking someone was the easy part. The hard part was figuring out what to do about it at that same moment. Olivia stood in her office, looking at her phone. His contact was there. She hadn't called, not yet, because she didn't know what to say. What if he had moved on? What if the island meant more to her than it did to him? Her finger hovered over the screen. Then she put the phone down, not out of fear, but because she realized something important. If what they had was real, it wouldn't disappear. It would find its way back somehow, some way, and maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of their story. Maybe this was the beginning of something even more complicated, something real, because love isn't tested when things are easy. It's tested in the real world, in distance, in silence, in uncertainty, and now that's exactly where they were, two people, same feelings, different worlds, waiting to see if what they found on that island was strong enough to survive reality. If you believe real love can survive distance, make sure to like this video, comment below. Should Olivia call Mark first? Or should he go to her? And don't forget to subscribe, because Chapter 7 might bring them face to face again, to be continued.